Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. And
Mhm.
today we're going deep into a topic that's really kind of unsettling, honestly. It's the world of scams, but specifically the kind that target people based on their faith.
Yeah, it's a tough one, but it's out there. It's a reality. And the more we know about it, the better we can protect ourselves and our communities, right?
Exactly. So we've got some excerpts here from this source called Pasted Text, and it just lays out some of the mechanics, the red flags, things to watch out for. And honestly, one of the first things that jumped out at me was this statistic that back in 2009, Arizona actually listed religion-based scams as their #1 scam. Can you believe that?
It's pretty wild, right? More than identity theft, even more than those Nigerian prince emails. It just goes to show that scammers are always looking for new angles, new ways to exploit people's vulnerabilities.
Yeah, and it's like this whole thing about faith being built on trust, generosity, the desire for good things. It's like those very things can be twisted and used against people.
Absolutely, and that's what makes these scams so insidious. They prey on the very things that make faith communities strong.
Right. It's not just some random stranger trying to pull a fast one. This is about people, sometimes within groups we already trust, who might have malicious intent.
Exactly, and that's where you get into things like that affinity church scam the text talks about. It's a classic example.
Yeah, that one really stuck with me too. So for those who haven't heard of it, how does this affinity church scam thing actually work?
Well, basically, scammers, they embed themselves in a congregation, right? They spend time building trust. They might volunteer, donate even small amounts at first, really appear to be genuine members of the community.
So it's like they're playing the long game, setting things up so that when they finally do propose something shady, it doesn't seem as suspicious.
Precisely. And by then, they've earned a certain level of credibility within the group, so people are more likely to let their guard down.
The text mentioned this case involving a gold bullion investment scheme. It was crazy. People lost over $50 million, and it was being promoted through daily prayer chains.
That's a perfect example of how they manipulate religious language and imagery to make their scams seem legitimate. People thought they were getting in on some divinely blessed opportunity.
And that's what gets me. It's one thing to lose money, but when your faith is exploited, that's got to leave some serious scars.
No doubt about it. The emotional and spiritual toll can be just as devastating as the financial loss.
So let's break down some of these specific tactics. The text outlines 5 main types of schemes. And I think it's important for people to be aware of what they are so we can be on guard.
Absolutely. So we've touched on affinity fraud, but let's dive into some of the others, starting with fake charities.
Oh man, those are everywhere, right? You see those appeals for donations, and sometimes the descriptions of where the money's actually going are so vague.
Right. And scammers will often capitalize on current events or crises to play on people's emotions. They know that when people are feeling generous, they're more likely to act impulsively.
So how do we avoid falling for these fake charity traps? What are some red flags?
Well, first off, look for a lack of transparency. Legitimate charities are upfront about their mission, how they use donations, all that. If an organization is being cagey about those details, that's a big warning sign.
And what about those high-pressure tactics? When they try to push you into donating immediately without giving you time to think or research?
Oh yeah, that's a classic sign. Something's probably fishy if they're trying to rush you into making a decision.
It's like they're trying to bypass your rational mind and appeal directly to your emotion.
Exactly. They're preying on that instinct to help to do good. And that's why those promises of blessings or guaranteed returns can be so effective.
Right, because they're tapping into that desire for something bigger than ourselves, that hope for divine favor or intervention.
Exactly. And that brings us to another category, investment scams, which often dangle this promise of financial prosperity alongside spiritual fulfillment.
It's like they're twisting scripture and spiritual principles to fit their own agenda.
And they use that religious rhetoric to create a sense of exclusivity or divine favor. You might hear phrases like, God wants you to be wealthy, or this is a blessed opportunity.
So again, it's about appealing to those deep-seated desires and beliefs, but in a manipulative way.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that healthy faith communities encourage critical thinking, not blind obedience.
Right, so if someone is discouraging you from seeking outside advice or questioning the details of an investment, that's a huge red flag.
Huge red flag. And then, of course, you have those unrealistic promises of returns. If something sounds too good to be true, It probably is.
Yeah, no kidding. There's no such thing as a guaranteed get-rich-quick scheme, especially when it's wrapped up in religious language.
And they'll often create a sense of urgency, too, saying things like, this is a limited time offer, or only a select few are being chosen.
It's all about playing on those psychological vulnerabilities, our fear of missing out, our desire for quick rewards.
Right. And that leads us to another type of scam, blessings. Scams which directly exploit people's desire for divine favor or intervention.
Ugh, this one really bugs me. It's like they're commodifying faith, turning it into a transaction.
It is. It's like they're saying, if you give me money, God will bless you.
And the text calls out some really disturbing red flags here. Promises of miracles, guaranteed financial windfalls, even messages that actively discourage questioning or skepticism.
Yeah, that last one is particularly insidious because healthy faith communities encourage critical thinking and dialogue, not blind obedience.
Right, it's about seeking understanding, not just blindly accepting what you're told.
Exactly. And if someone is telling you not to question their authority or seek outside advice, that's a huge red flag.
It's like they're trying to isolate you from other sources of information and support.
And that makes you more vulnerable to their manipulation.
So we've talked about fake charities, investment scams, blessing scams. What's a final type we need to be aware of?
Well, this one might seem the most audacious impersonation of religious leaders.
Wow, I could see how that would be effective. People naturally trust their pastors, priests, imams, rabbis, whoever their spiritual leader might be.
Exactly. And scammers will exploit that trust by posing as these figures, contacting people directly through emails, social media, even phone calls.
So it's not just about being cautious with strangers. It's about verifying that even communications from seemingly trusted figures are actually legitimate.
Absolutely. Be wary of any unusual requests for donations, especially if they come through unofficial channels or involve methods like wire transfers or gift cards.
That's difficult to trace, right?
Exactly. So if you get a message like that, don't hesitate to contact the religious leader or organization directly through established channels to confirm its authenticity.
And this is where that advice about consult with trusted leaders really comes into play, right? It's about having that second layer of confirmation.
Exactly. And it's not just about protecting yourself, but also about safeguarding the integrity of the entire community.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. But before we move on, I want to acknowledge something. What happens if someone listening realizes they've already fallen victim to one of these scams? What then?
That's a really important question. And unfortunately, it's a reality for many people. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, because the text focuses on the mechanics of scams, but not so much on that human cost.
Right. And that's what we need to address. How do people cope with the emotional and spiritual fallout of being scammed, especially in a context where their faith was exploited?
It's a heavy topic, but it's one we need to talk about.
Absolutely. And we'll delve into that right after this break.
Stay with us.
I think the first thing is just acknowledging what happened.
Oh, yeah. That's got to be tough. The text talked about feelings of shame, betrayal. It's not just the money. It's this feeling that your faith was somehow used against you.
Exactly. And victims often blame themselves, I should have known better. I was so naive. But the truth is these scammers are masters of manipulation.
They know how to push those buttons.
They do. They prey on good intentions, on people's desire to help, and they twist that trust to their advantage.
It's awful. So, okay, someone realizes they've been scammed. What do they do? The text mentioned reporting it to the authorities, getting legal advice.
Right. Those are important practical steps, especially for stopping the scam from spreading further. But alongside that, there's this whole emotional and spiritual element that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, because like we said, the text focuses on the nuts and bolts of the scams, but not so much on that human cost.
Imagine the impact on someone's trust. They might have been encouraged by a respected leader to invest, and now they feel betrayed on multiple levels. How do you reconcile that with your faith? It's a huge challenge.
And it ripples outward, too, right? It's not just the individual. It's the whole community that gets shaken.
Absolutely. It erodes that foundation of trust, that sense of safety that brought people together in the first place.
So how do you even begin to rebuild after something like this?
Well, it's a long process, but I think it starts with open and honest conversations, creating a safe space for victims to share their experiences without judgment.
Because if they're already blaming themselves, they don't need any more condemnation from others.
Exactly. It's about reaffirming that they're not alone, that what happened wasn't their fault.
And alongside that individual healing, you also have to address the systemic factors that allowed this to happen in the first place.
Right.
You got it.
Looking at financial practices, accountability, maybe even bringing in outside experts to educate the community about these types of scams.
It's almost like a post-trauma debrief, but for the entire group.
That's a good way to put it. And those trusted leaders, the text mentioned, they have a crucial role to play in this aftermath.
In terms of guiding that rebuilding process.
Exactly. They need to help restore trust, maybe even bring in counseling resources or create support groups for those who are affected.
So it's about shifting the focus from blame to understanding, acknowledging the hurt, but also reaffirming those core values, compassion, empathy, the stuff that should define a faith community.
Because even if a scam occurs, if those values are strong, the community can weather the storm and come out stronger on the other side.
Yeah, that resilience is key. And it makes me think about those high-profile examples of religious fraud the text talked about. Stuff like the PTL Club scandal, all those televangelist scams.
Right. And those cases show that even seemingly untouchable figures can be involved.
It's like a reminder that skepticism is healthy, even when you're dealing with people who have a lot of charisma or authority.
Absolutely. No matter someone's title or perceived authority, due diligence is essential.
It's about protecting yourself and your community.
Exactly. And, while we've been focusing on the financial and community aspects of these scams, I think there's another layer here that we need to acknowledge.
You're talking about the spiritual and emotional toll.
That's right. That internal struggle, the questioning of one's beliefs after being betrayed in such a way, those wounds run deep.
Yeah, it's like a spiritual trauma almost.
And those wounds require a different kind of healing. So how do we even begin to address that?
It feels like a whole other deep dive.
It does. But I think it starts with fostering open dialogue within faith communities. Creating a space where people feel comfortable expressing doubts, asking questions, seeking clarification without judgment.
So encouraging healthy skepticism, but within a framework of faith.
Exactly. It's about reminding people that genuine faith isn't about blind acceptance. It's about seeking understanding, and that sometimes asking tough questions is part of that journey.
This has been heavy stuff, but really insightful. We've explored this dark side of faith, but we've also uncovered some paths to protection and resilience.
And knowledge is power, right? The more we know about these scams, the better equipped we are to protect ourselves and those around us.
Exactly. So thank you for joining us on this deep dive. And please share this information with your communities. It could literally make a world of difference.
It could. And until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay strong.
So much to think about. We've talked about how these scams work, the red flags, the impact on people and communities. But as we wrap up, I keep circling back to this idea of spiritual resilience. Like, how do we protect not just our money, but also our hearts and minds?
That's the deeper challenge, right? Because practical steps, those are important, but they only go so far. You can verify charities, be cautious with investments, but what about that inner strength that helps you resist manipulation on a deeper level?
That's what I'm wrestling with. It's easy to say be skeptical, but how do you balance that with faith, which often encourages you to trust, to surrender?
It's a tough one, for sure. But I think it starts with a shift in perspective. Genuine faith. It's not about blind acceptance. It's about seeking understanding. It's about engaging with your beliefs on a deeper level. Questioning, exploring, doubting even.
So it's okay to have those doubts.
Absolutely. It's about what you do with them. Wrestle with them in a healthy way. And that's where open dialogue within faith communities becomes so important.
So you can share those doubts, those
Yeah.
questions in a safe space.
Exactly, without being judged or condemned.
Right.
Right? It's about creating that environment where people can really grapple with these tough issues.
It's almost like building up a spiritual immune system.
I like that analogy. Exposing yourself to different perspectives, learning to discern truth from falsehood, developing that inner strength to resist manipulation.
So it's not a one-time thing, it's an ongoing process.
Exactly. Spiritual resilience, it's something you cultivate over time through learning, growth, and discernment.
So what are some things people can do to actually build that resilience in their own lives and in their communities?
Well, first, I'd say fostering a culture of open inquiry, encouraging questions, welcoming doubts, creating opportunities for respectful dialogue.
So instead of avoiding those tough conversations, you lean into them.
That's it. Those conversations can be uncomfortable, but they're also opportunities for growth and understanding.
And it's not just about talking. It's also about giving people the tools to think critically.
Absolutely. Teach them how to examine information carefully, to consider different perspectives, to question assumptions, even those presented by trusted figures.
So it's like becoming a spiritual detective.
I love that. Looking for evidence, weighing different interpretations, arriving at your own conclusions.
And it's not just about individual effort, right? There's also this communal aspect to discernment.
Exactly. No one person has all the answers. Sometimes the wisdom of the group can be invaluable in recognizing and resisting deception.
So that advice about consulting with trusted leaders, It's not just about verifying specific requests. It's about fostering a culture of collective wisdom and accountability.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we're all in this together, and that by supporting each other, sharing our insights, challenging each other's assumptions, we can create a stronger, more resilient faith community.
This has been quite a journey, this deep dive.
Yeah.
It's heavy stuff, but important.
It is. We've explored some dark territory, but we've also come away with a deeper understanding of the threats we face and the tools we need to protect ourselves.
And our communities.
Exactly. Knowledge is power. Use what we've talked about today to safeguard yourself and those you love. And don't be afraid to share this information with others.
It could make a real difference.
It could. And until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, stay strong.
Thanks for joining us. And remember, we're all in this together.